In this video, we are going to see the blood supply of bone. Before that, we have to identify the parts of a long bone. We can clearly see the epiphysis at either end of a long bone. Then we have the metaphysis just proximal and distal to the epiphysis, and the middle portion will be the diaphysis. So actually metaphysis will be the junction between epiphysis and diaphysis. Then in a growing bone we will be able to identify this particular line. This is the epiphyseal line. It is actually the epiphyseal plate which will later forms into an epiphyseal line. Now we will move on to see the arterial supply of the bones. There are 4 sets of arteries which will supply a long bone, and they are the nutrient artery, then periosteal arteries, metaphyseal arteries and epiphyseal artery. Before going further, let's understand this diagram. This is a diagram showing the schematic parts of a bone, a long bone, and this upper part will be the epiphysis, this middle part will be this much area will be the diaphysis, and this area will be the distal epiphysis. This will be the proximal epiphysis, this will be the distal epiphysis. In between them we have the epiphyseal plate which will later becomes into the region of metaphysis. Now we will be seeing the arteries one by one. The first one will be the nutrient artery. Here it is. This is the nutrient artery. It enters the middle of the shaft, as we can clearly see over here, that is entering through the middle of the shaft, and the region or the foramen through which it enters into the shaft will be known as the foramen that is present over here will be known as the nutrient foramen. And after entering through the nutrient foramen, this artery passes obliquely through the cortex. We can clearly see the cortical part of the bone over here. So this is the oblique passage through the cortex. And after that, it divides into an ascending and a descending branch within the medullary cavity of the long bone. Each of this ascending and descending branch, they divides into a number of smaller parallel vessels. We can see the parallel vessels over here, and they enter into the region of metaphysis, and after that they form hairpin shaped loops, and these loops anastomoses with the arteries present over this region. Those will be the epiphyseal arteries, metaphyseal arteries and periosteal arteries. Because of these points, we can clearly understand this region of the metaphysis is the most vascular zone of the long bone. Because of its peculiar passage, then we can clearly see the nutrient artery supplies the medullary cavity, and it also supplies the inner 2/3 of the outer shell of compact bone of diaphysis and metaphysis. One of the unique feature of nutrient artery here we have to understand is the direction of the nutrient artery. In this example, in this diagram, this is the oblique direction of the nutrient artery. For every long bone, there will be a growing end. So by rule, the oblique direction of the nutrient foramen in the shaft is opposite to the growing end of the long bone. If you look at this particular diagram, this is the direction of the nutrient artery. This will be the growing end of the long bone. That will be opposite to the direction of the nutrient artery. Before entering into the nutrient foramen, the nutrient artery is very tortuous. The purpose of this tortuosity will be to not affect the artery during the movements of the bone. And the largest nutrient artery in the body will be the nutrient artery of the tibia. Now we move on to the next set of arteries, that will be the periosteal arteries. We can see a number of periosteal arteries over here. They are numerous and they ramify beneath the periosteum. This layer will be the periosteum. As shown in the schematic diagram, we can see the ramification of periosteal arteries within the or beneath the periosteum. They enter the bone through Walkman's canals and they supply the outer one-third of the cortex. We have already seen the inner one-third is supplied by this area. The inner one-third is inner two-thirds are supplied by the nutrient arteries, and now we are telling the outer one-third is supplied by the periosteal arteries. The periosteal vessels are especially numerous beneath the muscular and ligamentous attachments. The third set of artery will be metaphyseal arteries, or otherwise known as the juxta-epiphyseal arteries. They are derived from the neighboring arteries of the bone, and they enter the metaphysis directly along the attachment of joint capsule. This is the metaphyseal artery in this particular diagram. The fourth group of artery will be the epiphyseal arteries. We can see the epiphyseal arteries in this diagram over here. They are derived from arterial anastomosis around the joint, that is known as circulus vasculosus, and they enter the epiphysis either directly or after piercing the epiphyseal cartilage. So this was a general outline regarding the blood supply of long bone. Now we will see the peculiarities regarding the blood supply of other set of bones. First one will be the short long bones. To an extent, the blood supply of these bones, it is similar to that of a long bone, but there are certain exceptions. The first exception will be the first point, that is the nutrient artery enters the middle of the shaft and immediately divides to form a plexus. Instead of dividing into an ascending and descending branch in the long bone, here it is dividing into a plexus. The second point, the periosteal vessels supply the major part of the bone in adult and replace the nutrient vessels. Now, regarding the vertebra, blood supply of vertebra, mainly 3 sets of vessels will supply the vertebra. One or more large but short vessels enter the body of the vertebra from its posterior aspect through the basivertebral foramen. So as you already aware, vertebra will have a vertebral body, a vertebral foramen, and 2 transverse process, a spinous process. Blood supply will be different for each of these portions. We will consider the blood supply of body, then we will consider the blood supply of transverse process and spinous processes. So the body will be supplied by the vessels arising from the posterior aspect. That means the vessels are located within the vertebral canal and they supply the body from behind or posteriorly. In addition to that, another set of small vessels pierce the anterolateral surface of the body also. Then regarding the transverse process and spinous processes, there will be a set of long vessels. They pierce the root of transverse process and they supply these rest of the parts of the vertebra. Next will be the ribs. Mainly 2 set of vessels will supply the ribs, the nutrient artery and the periosteal arteries. Nutrient artery will enter into the rib just behind the tubercle. Then periosteal artery will supply the peripheral portions. So that was in a nutshell regarding the blood supply of all types of bones. Mainly we have discussed regarding the arterial supply. Now we will see the applied aspects. Most important condition will be osteomyelitis. In typical long bones, infection occurs in the metaphyseal regions mainly because they are richly supplied with the blood, and secondly because of the blood supply in the metaphysis is through end arteries forming the particular hairpin bends that you have seen along with the blood supply of long bones. Therefore, the bacteria and emboli are easily trapped in these hairpin bends, leading to necrosis of the bone or infection of the bone, resulting in a clinical condition that is known as osteomyelitis. In short long bones, the infection begins in the middle of the shaft because nutrient artery enters the middle of the shaft and immediately divides to form a plexus rather than dividing into ascending and descending branches.